from the banks. But what's interesting is there's actually a lot of news to cover here, news that the other news organizations are completely ignoring. They're basically just handmaidens to power at this point. They're not even pretending. But if you were paying any attention at all, if you thought for even a moment, I'm a journalist, I should cover the news, you might notice that they were getting, to charitably put it, mixed messages from people in power. For example, here's Mark Milley today explaining that Ukraine is armed to the teeth with American weaponry.
2 weeks ago, the United States released another security assistance package, which included HIMARS, ammunition, artillery, vehicle maintenance, and vehicles. Ukrainian soldiers wear the blue and yellow of the Ukrainian flag, but the colors of 50 other nations that met today stand beside Ukraine to support the principles of the rules-based international order.
Look how afraid that man looks. I almost want to play the tape again. Go back and look at that on the internet. That man is afraid. What's he afraid of? It'd be interesting to know. But what he just told us is we've sent a huge amount of material to Ukraine. Artillery, ammunition, 100 billion. So that would suggest that the Ukrainian military has a lot of equipment. They're well armed. Oh, but no, at the very same time that Mark Milley's telling us that, the Pentagon, just yesterday, informed us that actually Ukraine is running out of munitions.
There's reports out there from the battlefield that the Ukrainians are running out of munitions. They're having shortages. Is that a concern for the Pentagon, and what's the Pentagon doing to alleviate that problem?
Yeah, so as we've been doing since the beginning of this campaign, we're continuing to do everything that we can to ensure that we're meeting Ukraine's needs, whether it's ammunition, whether it's air defense, armor. You've heard us talk extensively about that. Tomorrow's discussion, of course, will be another opportunity to bring the international community together to focus on Ukraine's most urgent needs, to include ammunition.
Okay, so leaving aside the fact, the dead certain fact that the U.S. military probably should have enough of its own ammunition, now they're all invoking Ronald Reagan. Remember, peace through superior firepower, weakness invites aggression. Speaking of weakness, the U.S. military increasingly is weak, and part of the reason, there are a number of reasons, but one of them is we're sending all the stuff to Ukraine. So there's the military question that no one seems to have answered, but there's also an economic question. Where's all the money going? So we've spent more than Russia's typical annual military budget in Ukraine, and yet the Ukrainian military is out of ammunition again? Okay, that might be a question for Zelensky. Where's all the money going? On the phone with BlackRock all day. Where's all the money going? People are getting very rich. You can't have an audit, because if you want an audit of where your money is going into the most corrupt country in Europe, you're a tool of Putin. The media, by the way, isn't mad about the fact our money appears to be disappearing into this sinkhole of corruption called Ukraine, or being used to close Christian churches. No, they're mad because the House Speaker, Kevin McCarthy, hasn't rushed to kiss the ring of Zelensky. Watch.
President Volodymyr Zelensky makes an offer to the U.S. House Speaker that Kevin McCarthy is refusing.
Look at Kyiv, for example. He was invited to Kyiv by Zelensky. Any other Speaker of the House would have obviously gone there to show solidarity with our ally.
This is all completely Kevin McCarthy kind of pandering to the extreme wing of his party.
What is your reaction to Kevin McCarthy refusing President Zelensky's invitation to come to Ukraine or discuss with him directly aid to Ukraine?
I don't know what kind of single-celled creature Kevin McCarthy is more like. It's an amoeba or it's a paramecium. He is letting down the United States.
I understand Kevin McCarthy, again, is playing to his isolationist America first, which is actually not America first. It's actually America last on the world stage.
Wow, these people have a lot to answer for at some point, hopefully soon. But imagine how degrading the scenario you just witnessed is. They're hectoring the Speaker of the House. And by the way, we would defend, if the roles were reversed, a Democrat Speaker of the House on these same grounds, because they're American grounds, not partisan grounds. But here you have these people, these hair hats on television, scolding the American Speaker of the House because he won't suck up to a corrupt foreign leader who's demanding that you send your children to a war in a country you can't find on a map. Zelensky's on television almost every day demanding that you send your children to war, really, where they could die. Now, typically, people who demand that you put your children in a position where they could die, not your allies. Exactly. No, they're your enemies. Yeah. You must kiss his ring because he's a religious figure now, right? But as they were yapping about all of that, they missed, well, some other things that were going on in the United States. Like, for example, the collapse of our economy. The second and third biggest bank failures in the history of this country just took place. Now, the venerable Credit Suisse is down 97% from its all-time high. It's trading for about 2 Swiss francs. You worried about that? Yeah, probably. You should be. Your leaders aren't worried at all. The media don't care at all. Instead, they're telling you that you're a traitor to your country if you don't want a third world war. And they're panicked, of course, just like Milley was panicked in that tape. They're afraid. Why are they afraid? Because they know the public is not on their side. But the second we actually go to war with Russia, they will use that as a pretext to crush all dissent. There is no dissent allowed in wartime. And that's what this is really about, in addition to their personal enrichment. It's about changing the domestic politics of the United States. The second we can all say we're at war with Russia, not in effect, but in reality, in a hot war, which is what they want, that's the moment that you are no longer allowed to express your opinions. And the penalty is jail during war. That's happened a lot, and they want that now. Hopefully, on the basis of the questionnaires we received, other people will take charge soon and save us from this lunacy. In the meantime, Colonel Douglas McGregor joins us to assess what we're seeing. Doug, thank you so much for coming on. One of the very few people we trust. I think you've been honest since the very beginning and taken a lot of abuse for it. Where do you think this conflict stands tonight?
Well, the Ukrainians are being crushed. Even the Washington Post and the New York Times are now finally beginning to print the truth. Their casualties are horrific. We've effectively seen the Russians destroy 3 separate armies built by the Ukrainians. And everyone is beginning to wonder what's really happening. The truth is coming out that this war was not started by Russia, that Russia begged us not to try and drag Ukraine into NATO. We ignored Russia, and Russia made it very clear that they were going to defend their national interest. All they wanted was neutrality for Ukraine. Americans know something else, and I think somebody said this a few years ago. It's the economy, stupid. And every Republican candidate understands that and has to win the American people over. The people in Washington are worried about their donors. The Republican candidates are worried about American voters.
Well, I mean, to see Lindsey Graham invoke Ronald Reagan, who won the Cold War with a superior economy and not with tanks, that's true. Ignore the fact that our banks are collapsing. How exactly do you think people like Graham and virtually every Republican senator, with a few honorable exceptions, how do they think we're going to afford a war against Russia and China simultaneously?
Well, it's unaffordable. It's unaffordable against Russia. You don't have to lump China with the rest of them. It's impossible. We are on the road to bankruptcy. The American people sense it. The bank bailouts are not going to happen as they did before. The best thing I can think of is to say that Lindsey Graham and his peers in Washington, they're not channeling Ronald Reagan. They're channeling the Three Stooges. The last thing Americans need is a war. No more political and military incompetence, ineptitude, corruption. They want an economy that works, and they're not going to stand around and watch the financial system go under. They want real leadership, not a cardboard cutout president.
If we actually followed Lindsey Graham's advice and attacked the Russian Air Force and, of course, immediately became embroiled in a hot war with Russia, how long before you were arrested would it be, do you think, for saying what you just did?
Oh, I don't know, but I'm less concerned about that than the possibility that we would actually provoke a direct confrontation with the Russians. What have we already seen, Tucker? They're ready to fight. They're already partially mobilized. They'll put millions of men into the field quickly. We're not in a position to do that. We can't even recruit for our armed forces. The left has destroyed the United States Armed Forces. Who are we kidding? Our stocks that we built up over years with ammunition and equipment, they're exhausted. We haven't even gone to war. This is lunacy.
It is lunacy. It is lunacy. And no one calls it out. Colonel Doug McGregor, it's great to see you tonight. Thank you for your clarity.